Sarah Thompson wiped down the last table of her shift at the Golden Plate, an upscale Los Angeles restaurant known for its celebrity clientele. The clock on the wall showed 10:45 p.m., just 15 minutes before closing time. Her feet ached from the long shift, but she managed to keep a warm smile on her face, a skill she perfected during her 3 years of waitressing. The kitchen staff had already begun their closing routines, with the clanking of pots and pans echoing from behind the swinging doors. Most of her coworkers were counting their tips or finishing their side work, eager to head home after another busy Friday night. Sarah's manager, Mr. Roberts, a stern-faced man in his 50s, was in his office doing the night's paperwork. Just as Sarah was about to untie her apron, the restaurant's heavy glass doors swung open. A cool breeze swept through the dimly lit dining room, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of expensive cologne. Sarah turned around, ready to politely inform the late arrivals that the kitchen was closing. Her words caught in her throat as she recognized the tall, lean figure leading the group. It was Snoop Dogg, accompanied by what appeared to be his entourage. 4 well-dressed men and 2 women. Sarah's heart began to race. Growing up in Compton, she'd always been a huge fan of the rapper, and now here he was, standing in her section of the restaurant. "I know y'all about to close," Snoop said in his characteristic drawl, "but me and my people just finished a studio session, and we're starving." His friendly smile put Sarah at ease, despite the butterflies in her stomach. Before Sarah could respond, she heard Mr. Roberts's voice from behind her. "I'm sorry, sir, but our kitchen is closing for the night." He spoke without looking up from his phone, not realizing who the customer was. Sarah took a deep breath and made a split-second decision. "It's no problem at all," she said confidently, stepping forward. "Please, let me show you to our best table." She caught Mr. Roberts's disapproving glare but chose to ignore it. As she led the group to a spacious corner booth, Sarah could feel the eyes of her coworkers on her back. Some were excited whispers, others frustrated sighs. The kitchen staff would definitely not be happy about this last-minute order, but Sarah couldn't bring herself to turn away Snoop Dogg of all people. "Thank you, sister," Snoop said as he settled into the leather booth. "You didn't have to do this, but we appreciate it." His genuine gratitude made Sarah's decision feel right, despite knowing she might face consequences. Sarah smoothly distributed menus and took drink orders, her hands slightly trembling with excitement. As she moved between the kitchen and the table, she could hear snippets of conversation about a new album and upcoming tours. The kitchen staff, though initially annoyed, became more interested when they learned who the late-night customers were. Mr. Roberts, however, stood at his usual spot near the host's stand, arms crossed and jaw clenched. Sarah knew that look. It was the same one he'd given her last week when she comped a meal for an elderly couple who'd forgotten their wallet. He was adding this to his mental list of her violations. For the next hour, Sarah provided impeccable service, ensuring every detail was perfect. She recommended her favorite dishes, cracked jokes with the group, and made sure their glasses were never empty. Snoop and his entourage were perfect guests, polite, appreciative, and generous with their laughter. When it came time for the bill, Snoop pulled out a thick wallet. "You're good people," he told Sarah, his eyes sincere. "Not everyone would have served us this late, but you did it with a smile. That means something." Sarah couldn't help but beam with pride. "It was my pleasure, really," she replied, trying to maintain her professional composure while internally dancing with joy. As she processed the payment, Mr. Roberts approached her at the register. His voice was low but sharp. "We need to talk about this in my office when they leave." Sarah's stomach dropped, but she nodded, keeping her expression neutral. She watched as Snoop and his group gathered their things, still chatting and laughing. They'd all thanked her again as they headed toward the exit, with Snoop giving her a friendly fist bump. "Keep doing your thing, sister," he said. "Good people like you are rare these days." Little did Sarah know that this interaction, which felt like a dream come true, would lead to one of the most challenging, and ultimately rewarding, moments of her life. As she watched them disappear into the night, she straightened her shoulders and turned to face whatever consequences awaited her in Mr. Roberts's office. The walk to Mr. Roberts's office felt like the longest journey of Sarah's life. The restaurant was now empty except for the remaining staff, who watched her with a mixture of sympathy and curiosity. The clicking of her shoes against the hardwood floor echoed through the quiet dining room as she made her way to the back. Mr. Roberts sat behind his desk, his face illuminated by the harsh fluorescent light overhead. The small office was cluttered with paperwork, schedules, and vendor invoices. A half-empty cup of coffee sat forgotten on the corner of his desk. "Sit down, Sarah," he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority he'd cultivated over 20 years in restaurant management. Sarah lowered herself into the uncomfortable wooden chair across from him, her hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. "Do you understand what you did wrong tonight?" he began, leaning forward in his chair. Without waiting for her response, he continued, "This isn't the first time you've broken protocol. Last week it was that elderly couple. The week before that, you gave free desserts to those kids celebrating their mother's birthday." Sarah took a deep breath. "Mr. Roberts, I understand the rules, but these were special circumstances. That was Snoop Dogg and the publicity alone." "I don't care if it was the President of the United States," he cut her off sharply. "Rules are rules. The kitchen staff had to stay an extra hour. The cleaning crew is behind schedule, and you've shown, once again, that you think you can make your own decisions about how this restaurant should be run." The air conditioning hummed loudly in the background as Sarah felt her face grow hot. Through the thin office walls, she could hear the distant sound of dishes being washed and chairs being stacked. "Furthermore," Mr. Roberts continued, pulling out a folder, "I've been keeping track of your infractions. Late clock-ins, unauthorized comp meals, extending kitchen hours without permission." He listed them off like a prosecutor presenting evidence. Sarah's mind raced back to each instance he mentioned. The elderly couple who'd forgotten their wallet. She couldn't bear to see their embarrassment. The birthday celebration where she'd surprised the family with complimentary desserts. Their joy had been worth the cost of a few slices of cake. And tonight, how could she turn away someone like Snoop Dogg? "Mr. Roberts, every decision I made was for the good of the restaurant." She defended herself, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Those customers left happy. They'll come back, they'll tell others about their experience." "Enough." Mr. Roberts slammed his palm on the desk, making Sarah jump. "This isn't about customer service. This is about following procedures. This is about respecting authority and chain of command." He pulled out a pink slip from his desk drawer, and Sarah's heart sank. She knew what was coming before he even started speaking. "I'm terminating your employment, effective immediately," he said, his voice cold and professional. "You'll receive your final paycheck in the mail, including tonight's tips. Please leave your apron and name tag before you go." Sarah sat there, stunned. 3 years of service, countless regular customers who requested her section, all the extra shifts she'd covered. None of it mattered now. Her mind immediately went to her rent payment due next week and her mother's medical bills she helped with. With trembling fingers, she untied her apron and unpinned her name tag. She placed them carefully on Mr. Roberts's desk, refusing to let him see the tears threatening to spill from her eyes. "Is there anything else?" she asked, proud that her voice didn't crack. Mr. Roberts shook his head, already turning his attention to some paperwork on his desk. "That will be all. Security will walk you out." As Sarah gathered her personal belongings from her locker, her coworkers watched in silence. A few tried to catch her eye, offering sympathetic looks, but most turned away, afraid of being associated with her dismissal. The security guard, Mike, who had always been kind to her, walked her to her car. "This isn't right," he muttered, but they both knew there was nothing he could do. Sarah sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel, trying to process what had just happened. The parking lot was nearly empty now, the restaurant's neon sign casting a red glow over her dashboard. She'd lost her job, her primary source of income, all because she tried to provide good service to a celebrity customer. As she pulled out of the parking lot, she had no way of knowing that her act of kindness, which had cost her job, was about to change her life in ways she couldn't imagine. Sometimes, she would later reflect, losing everything is the first step to gaining something much greater. Sarah's small apartment felt especially empty that night. The yellow streetlight outside her window cast long shadows across her living room as she sat on her worn couch, still in her black work pants and white button-up shirt. Her phone lay silent beside her, though she'd already sent out desperate text messages to friends about possible job openings. At 2 a.m., sleep refused to come. She opened her laptop and began searching for restaurant jobs in the area. The bright screen illuminated her tired face as she scrolled through countless listings, each one seeming less promising than the last. Her savings would only cover next month's rent and utilities, and the thought made her stomach churn with anxiety. The next morning, Sarah woke up to her phone buzzing incessantly. At first, she thought it was her mom calling to check on her, as she did every Sunday. Instead, she found her social media notifications exploding with activity. Confused and still groggy, she opened Instagram to find hundreds of new followers and comments flooding her profile. Her hands began to shake as she saw what was causing the commotion. Snoop Dogg had posted about her. There on his official Instagram account, with millions of followers, was a post that would change everything. Shout out to the sister at the Golden Plate who kept the kitchen open for us last night. Found out they fired her for showing love. That ain't right. Real ones know good service when they see it. At Sarah_Thompson. Check your DMs. Sarah nearly dropped her phone. She quickly opened her direct messages, and there it was, a message from Snoop Dogg's verified account. The message was brief but life-changing. Hey sister, hit up my team at this number. We got something for you. As she stared at the message, her phone began ringing with calls from unknown numbers. Local news stations, radio shows, and entertainment websites were all trying to reach her. The story was spreading like wildfire. Black waitress fired after serving Snoop Dogg past closing time. Sarah's mom called, her voice filled with excitement. Baby, you're on the morning news. They're talking about you on every channel. Still in her pajamas, Sarah turned on her TV. Sure enough, there was her story on the local morning news. They were showing pictures of the restaurant and discussing workplace fairness. Social media was ablaze with hashtags supporting her. Hashtag Justice for Sarah and hashtag Boycott Golden Plate were trending. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a text from her former coworker, Lisa. Girl, you should see the restaurant's reviews right now. They're getting destroyed online. Mr. Roberts is losing it. Sarah checked the Golden Plate's online reviews. Hundreds of new one-star reviews had appeared overnight, with people criticizing the management's decision to fire her. The restaurant's rating had plummeted. As she sat there, trying to process everything, another call came in, this time from a number she didn't recognize. With trembling fingers, she answered. Hello, is this Sarah Thompson? A professional voice asked. This is Marcus Jenkins. I'm part of Snoop's management team. We'd like to discuss an opportunity with you. Sarah's heart pounded as she listened to Marcus explain that Snoop was impressed not just with her service, but with her character. They had a proposition for her, but they wanted to discuss it in person. Can you meet us at the Beverly Hills Hotel at 2 p.m. today? Marcus asked. We'll send a car for you. Sarah agreed, her mind spinning. She spent the next few hours getting ready, trying to choose the perfect professional outfit from her limited wardrobe. As she applied her makeup, her phone continued to buzz with messages of support from strangers across the country. At exactly 1:30 p.m., a sleek black SUV pulled up outside her apartment building. The driver, wearing a suit and sunglasses, opened the door for her. Miss Thompson, he said with a respectful nod. As the car navigated through Los Angeles traffic, Sarah watched the city pass by through tinted windows. Just yesterday, she'd been a waitress worried about making rent. Now, she was heading to a meeting that could change her entire life. She thought about Mr. Roberts and the Golden Plate. The restaurant's phone lines had been ringing non-stop all morning with complaints. Local news vans were parked outside, hoping to get a statement from management. Looking at her reflection in the car window, Sarah took a deep breath. She didn't know what opportunity awaited her at the Beverly Hills Hotel, but she knew one thing for certain. Getting fired might have been the best thing that ever happened to her. The SUV pulled up to the hotel's elegant entrance. As the driver opened her door, Sarah straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. Whatever came next, she was ready to face it with the same grace and professionalism that had gotten her into this situation in the first place. The Beverly Hills Hotel lobby sparkled with luxury, its pink walls and crystal chandeliers a stark contrast to Sarah's modest apartment. A well-dressed woman. Sarah was led through marble corridors to a private conference room, where Marcus Jenkins waited alongside two other members of Snoop's management team. The room's large windows overlooked the hotel's famous gardens, and a spread of refreshments covered one end of the polished table. Sarah, thank you for coming, Marcus said, standing to shake her hand. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe in his mid-30s, wearing a designer suit that probably cost more than her yearly rent. "Please, have a seat. Would you like something to drink?" As Sarah settled into the plush leather chair, her phone buzzed again. The Golden Plate had finally released a public statement, attempting to defend their actions. She silenced her phone, focusing on the meeting at hand. "Let me get straight to the point," Marcus began, opening a leather portfolio. "What happened to you last night was wrong, but it's created an opportunity. Snoop was impressed not just by your service, but by your character. We've been looking for someone to manage his private events and coordinate his home entertainment staff." Sarah's eyes widened as Marcus continued. "The position includes overseeing dinner parties, family gatherings, and industry events. You'd be responsible for hiring and managing service staff, coordinating with caterers, and ensuring everything runs smoothly." He slid a document across the table. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she looked at the salary figure. It was more than 5 times what she made at the Golden Plate. "But I'm just a waitress," Sarah said softly, still processing the opportunity before her. Diana, who had remained in the room, spoke up. "You're more than that. You showed judgment, professionalism, and grace under pressure. Those are exactly the qualities we need." As they discussed the details, Sarah learned that the position would also include full benefits, a company car, and the chance to travel with Snoop's team during major events. They wanted her to start immediately. "There's one more thing," Marcus added, pulling out another folder. "The media attention around your story is growing. We've had multiple requests for interviews, and several brands have reached out about potential sponsorship deals." Sarah's head spun as Marcus explained how her story had resonated with people. Major news networks wanted to feature her. Social media companies were offering partnerships. Her follower count had jumped to over 100,000 in less than 24 hours. "We can help you manage all of this," Marcus explained. "Our PR team will guide you through interviews, help you build your platform, and turn this moment into a lasting opportunity." As they talked, Sarah's phone kept lighting up with notifications. Her best friend had texted that the Golden Plate was now facing protests outside their door. Local community leaders were calling for a boycott. The restaurant's rating had dropped to 1 star. Suddenly, the conference room door opened, and Snoop Dogg himself walked in, bringing his characteristic laid-back energy to the formal setting. "What's up, sister?" He greeted Sarah with a warm smile. "How you holding up?" Sarah stood, trying to maintain her composure. "I'm good. Thank you so much for everything you've done." "Nah, thank you," Snoop replied, taking a seat at the table. "You showed real character that night. That's rare in this city. When I heard they fired you, I knew we had to make it right." They spent the next hour discussing the position in detail. Snoop shared his vision for upcoming events and explained why he believed Sarah would be perfect for the role. His genuine interest in her success made the overwhelming opportunity feel more manageable. As the meeting concluded, Marcus presented Sarah with a contract to review. "Take it home, have a lawyer look it over," he advised. "We can finalize everything tomorrow." Walking out of the hotel, Sarah felt like she was floating. The same black SUV was waiting to take her home. As she settled into the back seat, her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Baby, Ellen DeGeneres' show just called. They want you on tomorrow." Sarah looked out at the palm trees lining Sunset Boulevard, thinking about how much her life had changed in just 24 hours. Yesterday, she'd been worried about paying her rent. Today, she was being offered a dream job and opportunities she'd never imagined. The SUV pulled up to her apartment building, but Sarah knew she wouldn't be living there much longer. As she stepped out, the driver handed her a business card with a number to call when she needed the car tomorrow. Standing in front of her building, Sarah took a deep breath of the Los Angeles air. Sometimes, she realized, losing everything was just the universe's way of making room for something better. The break room at the Golden Plate. Sarah sat on a comfortable couch, surrounded by fresh flowers and fruit platters, while a makeup artist touched up her face. Her mother sat nearby, beaming with pride and occasionally wiping away tears of joy. "5 minutes, Miss Thompson," a production assistant called out, poking her head through the door. Sarah smoothed down her new dress, a designer piece the show's stylist had selected for her. Just days ago, she'd been wearing a basic black uniform and comfortable work shoes. The past 48 hours had been a whirlwind. After signing the contract with Snoop's management team, Sarah had been swept into a world she'd only seen on television. Her Instagram followers had grown to over 500,000. Brands were flooding her inbox with partnership offers. News outlets worldwide were sharing her story. As she waited to go on stage, Sarah checked her phone one last time. The Golden Plate had finally issued a formal apology, offering her job back with a promotion to management. She smiled, knowing that ship had long sailed. Ladies and gentlemen, Alan's voice boomed through the speakers. Our next guest is a former waitress whose story has captured hearts across America. Please welcome Sarah Thompson. Walking onto the brightly lit stage, Sarah felt surprisingly calm. The audience's warm applause wrapped around her like a comfortable blanket. Ellen greeted her with a genuine hug. So, Sarah, Ellen began once they were seated. Tell us about that night. Did you know it was Snoop Dogg when he walked in? Sarah shared her story, her natural warmth and humor shining through. The audience laughed when she described Mr. Roberts' face upon realizing who he'd almost turned away. They gasped when she recounted her firing, and they cheered when she revealed her new position. But wait, Ellen said, her signature mischievous smile appearing. We have a surprise for you. Please welcome Snoop Dogg. The audience erupted as Snoop walked out, carrying a large envelope. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth in surprise. After another round of hugs, Snoop sat down and explained why Sarah's actions had moved him. See, it ain't just about keeping the kitchen open, he said. It's about treating people right, even when it costs you something. That's the kind of person we need more of in this world. Then came Ellen's famous surprise. She opened the envelope Snoop had brought, revealing a check for $50,000. This is from me and Snoop, Ellen explained. We want you to use it to start your own charitable foundation, helping service workers who face unfair treatment. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes as the audience cheered. Her mother, watching from the side, was openly crying now. After the show, Sarah's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Major restaurant chains wanted to partner with her foundation. Labor rights organizations asked her to speak at their events. A publishing company even offered her a book deal to share her story of perseverance and unexpected blessings. Back in her hotel room that evening, Sarah finally had a moment to process everything. Her new office at Snoop's entertainment company would be ready next week. She had meetings scheduled with potential foundation partners. The Ellen Show appearance would air in a few days, likely bringing even more opportunities. She opened her laptop to find an email from Lisa, her former co-worker at the Golden Plate. The restaurant's business had dropped dramatically since her firing. Mr. Roberts had been placed on administrative leave, pending an investigation into his management practices. But what touched Sarah most were the messages from other service workers sharing their similar experiences. People who'd been fired for showing kindness, for bending rules to help customers, for choosing humanity over policy. She realized her story had become something bigger than herself. Looking at her hotel window at the Los Angeles skyline, Sarah thought about how different her view had been just 3 days ago. She'd been crying in her car, worried about her future. Now, she was preparing to help others while building her own dreams. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Ready for tomorrow. Big meeting with the foundation lawyers at 9 a.m. Sarah smiled as she replied. She was more than ready. Sometimes life's biggest setbacks lead to its greatest comebacks. As she prepared for bed, she thought about all the other service workers out there, hoping her story would give them courage to stand up for what's right. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but Sarah Thompson was no longer just a waitress who lost her job. She was becoming a voice for change, proof that kindness, even when costly, has a way of coming back multiplied. 3 months had passed since that fateful night at the Golden Plate. Sarah sat in her spacious new office, overlooking the Hollywood Hills. The wall behind her desk displayed framed magazine covers featuring her story, while her desk held a small golden nameplate reading Sarah Thompson, Director of Entertainment Services. Her morning started with a video conference with event planners for Snoop's upcoming album release party. Sarah had already proven herself masterful at organizing high-profile gatherings, bringing her natural warmth and attention to detail to every event she managed. The guest list is at 300 now, her assistant, Jasmine, reported as she entered the office with Sarah's morning coffee, and Drake's team just confirmed he'll be performing. Sarah nodded, making notes on her iPad. Her day planner was filled with meetings, but her first priority was the afternoon's foundation launch. The Thompson Workers' Rights Foundation was finally ready to begin its mission, with an initial fund of over $2 million raised from corporate sponsors and private donors. As she reviewed the launch event details, her phone lit up with a text from Snoop. "You ready for tonight, boss lady? A whole industry gonna be there." Sarah smiled at the message. Over the past months, Snoop had become not just her employer but a mentor, guiding her through the complexities of the entertainment industry. His faith in her abilities had never wavered. The foundation launch was being held at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. As Sarah walked through the ballroom during final preparations, she could hardly believe how far she'd come. Banners displayed the foundation's mission, protecting those who serve. Television crews were setting up their equipment, preparing to broadcast the event live. Her mother arrived early, dressed in a designer gown Sarah had bought her. "Look at you," she said, hugging Sarah tight. "From serving tables to serving justice, your father would have been so proud." The event began at 7 p.m. sharp, the ballroom filled with celebrities, business leaders, and activists. Even some of Sarah's former co-workers from the Golden Plate were there as honored guests, including Lisa, who had since become the foundation's first employee. When it was time for Sarah's speech, she approached the podium with confidence. The nervous waitress from 3 months ago had been replaced by a poised, powerful advocate for workers' rights. "3 months ago, I was fired for showing kindness," she began, her voice clear and strong. "Today, we're launching a foundation that will ensure no other service worker has to choose between doing what's right and keeping their job." She outlined the foundation's programs: legal aid for unfairly terminated workers, emergency financial assistance, job placement services, and advocacy for better workplace policies. The audience applauded as she announced their first initiative, a partnership with major restaurant chains to develop more equitable management practices. After her speech, Snoop took the stage. "When I walked into that restaurant that night, I was just hungry," he said, drawing laughs from the crowd. "I didn't know I was about to meet someone who would change the game." Sarah Thompson ain't just a success story. She's a revolution in how we treat service workers in this country. The evening's biggest surprise came when several major restaurant industry leaders pledged additional millions to the foundation. Even the Golden Plate's parent company, trying to repair their damaged reputation, announced a significant donation. Later that night, as the event wound down, Sarah found a quiet moment alone on the hotel's terrace. The Los Angeles lights sparkled below as she reflected on her journey. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. The event was already making headlines. Former Waitress launches multi-million-dollar foundation to protect service workers. Jasmine appeared at the terrace door. "Sarah, People magazine wants to schedule a cover shoot for next week, and your mother is looking for you." Snoop invited everyone to his house for an after-party. Sarah took one last look at the city lights. She thought about all the service workers out there, standing on tired feet, dealing with difficult customers and demanding bosses. Thanks to her foundation, they would now have somewhere to turn when they needed help. As she walked back into the ballroom, several young servers working the event caught her eye. They smiled shyly, clearly knowing her story. Sarah stopped to talk with them, asking about their experiences and sharing her contact information. "Never let anyone make you feel small for showing kindness," she told them. "Sometimes the worst day of your life can lead to the best chapter of your story." With that, Sarah gathered her team to head to Snoop's house, ready to celebrate not just her success, but the beginning of real change for service workers everywhere. 1 year had passed since Sarah's firing from the Golden Plate, and her life had transformed beyond recognition. She stood at the podium in Washington, D.C., addressing a congressional committee on workers' rights. The Thompson Workers' Rights Foundation had helped over 10,000 service industry employees in its first year alone. "When I served tables, I never imagined I'd be speaking to Congress," Sarah began, her voice steady and confident. "But here I am, representing millions of service workers who deserve better protection and respect." The hearing room was packed with journalists, activists, and industry representatives. In the front row sat her mother, beaming with pride, and Snoop Dogg, who had flown in specifically to support her testimony. Sarah presented compelling statistics: cases of unfair termination, workplace discrimination, and employee rights violations that her foundation had documented. Her personal story had become a powerful catalyst for national change. "We're not just asking for better laws," she explained to the committee. We're asking for a cultural shift in how we treat service workers in America. After the hearing, several senators approached her to discuss potential legislation. The Thompson Fair Service Act was already gaining bipartisan support, promising to establish stronger protections for service industry employees. Later that evening, Sarah received an unexpected call. It was Mr. Roberts, her former manager from the Golden Plate. "I've been following your work," he said, his voice carrying a hint of remorse. "You've really made a difference. I wanted to apologize for how I treated you that night." Sarah listened as her former boss explained how her story had changed his own management style. The Golden Plate had undergone a complete cultural transformation, becoming a model for worker-friendly policies in the restaurant industry. Back in her hotel room, Sarah opened her laptop to find an email from Time magazine. They wanted to feature her in their 100 Most Influential People issue. The draft article, written by Snoop Dogg himself, brought tears to her eyes. Sarah Thompson didn't just turn lemons into lemonade. She built a whole lemonade empire and made sure everyone got a fair share. Her story ain't just about success. It's about changing the game for people who never had a voice before. Her phone buzzed with a message from Jasmine, her assistant. The foundation's new initiative, a nationwide training program for restaurant managers, had just secured funding from major investors. They would be able to expand to all 50 states by the end of the year. Sarah walked to her hotel window, looking out at the Washington Monument illuminated against the night sky. Her new life included private jets, meetings with politicians, and the ability to create real change. But she never forgot what it felt like to stand for hours carrying heavy trays, dealing with difficult customers, or worrying about making rent. Tomorrow, she would be meeting with the president's economic advisors to discuss service industry reform. Next week, she would launch a scholarship program for service workers pursuing higher education. The foundation was even developing an app to help workers document workplace violations and access legal resources. As she prepared for bed, Sarah received one more surprise. Lisa, her former coworker who now ran the foundation's West Coast office, sent a video. It showed hundreds of service workers gathering outside the Golden Plate, not in protest this time, but in celebration. The restaurant had just announced it would adopt all of the Thompson Foundation's recommended policies, including higher wages and better benefits. Sarah sat on her hotel bed, watching the video of celebrating workers. Some were crying, others hugging. Many held signs reading, "Thank you, Sarah," and "Service Workers Unite." This was why she did what she did. Her phone rang one last time. It was Snoop. "You killed it today, boss lady," he said. "Ready for tomorrow's meeting with the president?" Sarah smiled. "Ready as I'll ever be," she replied. "By the way, how's the planning going for your wife's surprise birthday party next month?" "Man, you know that's your department," Snoop laughed. "That's why we hired you in the first place. You take care of everything." After hanging up, Sarah reviewed her schedule for the next day. Between meetings with politicians and foundation work, she was still personally overseeing Snoop's private events. She never wanted to lose touch with the hands-on service work that had started her journey. As she drifted off to sleep, Sarah thought about that night at the Golden Plate. Getting fired that felt like the end of the world. Instead, it had been the beginning of a movement that was changing thousands of lives. Sometimes, she realized, the worst moments in life lead to the most meaningful missions. 5 years had passed since that fateful night at the Golden Plate. Sarah Thompson stood on stage at the Global Service Industry Summit, now a world-renowned advocate for workers' rights and CEO of a foundation that had helped over 1 million service workers worldwide. The audience of thousands included restaurant owners, hotel executives, and service workers from around the globe. The Thompson Workers' Rights Foundation had expanded to 30 countries, with offices on every continent. Its mobile app had become the #1 resource for service workers seeking help and information about their rights. 5 years ago, I was fired for keeping a kitchen open late. Sarah began her keynote speech. Today, we've helped change laws in 47 states and 15 countries. But our work isn't finished. In the front row sat familiar faces. Her mother, now running the foundation's education program. Snoop Dogg, still her biggest supporter and friend. And Lisa, who had risen to become the foundation's international director. Even Mr. Roberts was there. He now conducted management training sessions, teaching others what not to do. The Golden Plate, under new ownership, had become a model establishment for worker rights. They now offered full benefits, living wages, and paid education for all employees. The restaurant had even named their main dining room Sarah's section in her honor. After her speech, Sarah had a surprise announcement. "Today, we're launching the Thompson Institute for Service Excellence," she revealed. A fully accredited college offering free education to service workers, with campuses in Los Angeles, New York, and Chicago. The crowd erupted in applause as she explained how the institute would provide degrees in hospitality management, business administration, and workers' rights law. Full scholarships would be available to any service worker wanting to advance their education. Later that evening, at a private celebration in Snoop's mansion, Sarah took a moment to reflect. The walls of the entertainment room displayed framed memories of her journey, her Ellen Show appearance, Time magazine cover, congressional testimony, and countless awards. "Remember when you just wanted to serve me dinner?" Snoop laughed, joining her by the memory wall. "Now look at you, changing the whole world." Sarah smiled, remembering how nervous she'd been that night. "Sometimes I miss just being a waitress," she admitted. "It was simpler then." "That's why people trust you," Snoop replied. "You never forgot where you came from." Indeed, Sarah still made time to personally serve at major events she organized. She believed leaders should never forget what it's like to be on the front lines. Just last week, she helped wait tables at a state dinner she coordinated at the White House. Her phone buzzed, another achievement to celebrate. The Thompson Fair Service Act had just passed in its final state, Hawaii, making it law nationwide. The act guaranteed fair treatment, better wages, and proper benefits for all service workers. The Foundation's latest statistics showed remarkable progress. Workplace violations down 60%, average service worker wages up 40%, and employee satisfaction at an all-time high. The Sarah Thompson effect, as media called it, had revolutionized the service industry. As the celebration continued, Sarah stepped out onto the balcony. The Los Angeles skyline sparkled just as it had that night she'd lost her job. She thought about the scared young woman crying in her car, wondering how she'd pay her rent. If only she could tell that version of herself what was coming, that losing her job would lead to helping millions of others keep theirs. That standing up for what was right, even when it cost her everything, would inspire a global movement. Her assistant appeared at the door. "Sarah, the president is on the line. He wants to discuss expanding the Thompson Institute internationally." Before heading inside, Sarah took one last look at the city lights. Tomorrow, she would fly to Europe to open new foundation offices. Next month, she would address the United Nations about global service worker rights. The following quarter, the Thompson Institute would welcome its first 1,000 students. But tonight, she just wanted to celebrate how far they'd all come. She rejoined the party, where service workers, celebrities, and business leaders mingled as equals. This was her real achievement, breaking down the barriers between those who served and those being served. 5 years ago, she'd been fired for keeping a kitchen open late for Snoop Dogg. Today, she helped open doors of opportunity for millions of others. As she looked around at the smiling faces, Sarah knew that sometimes getting fired isn't the end of your story, it's just the beginning of a much bigger one.